Educational Insights, a Slate Valley Unified podcast, hosted by Director of Curriculum, Casey O'Meara. Episode number 16, Cognia Testing.
Hello, I'm Casey O'Meara, and I'm the Director of Curriculum in Slate Valley. And with me today are two of my colleagues, Judy Folmsbee, who's a fifth grade teacher, and Abby Wald, who's an instructional coach in Slate Valley. And Judy had an idea around January, I believe, maybe it was December, about hosting an event in the evening for community members to come and learn about the state tests that we've now given 3 times, I believe.
This particular one.
And so Abby and Judy collaborated and created presentation, and then worked with our data and assessment coordinator to have Chromebooks set up where any attendee, I guess, could participate in taking the state test. And we had a few people attend that evening event. We also provided childcare and pizza because we hoped that might be enticing to folks. And then I talked about it a bit with our superintendent, Brooke Olson-Farrell, and she thought it might be a nice idea to share it with the school board. So I reached out to Abby and Judy, and they were willing to share with the school board. So they condensed the slides that we shared in February for the meeting that we had on March 24th. Was the date, I think, the school board?
It was a Monday. I know it was Monday.
And so they're going to share that presentation with all of you.
I'm going to present slides so that people can see them while we're chatting. And first, I want to say I did get some feedback from people. They were confused. They said, do we take Cognia or VTCAP? Because we were using both of those terms. And Cognia is like the brand name of VTCAP is kind of the way I look at it. Like Cognia is the company that makes it, right? And VTCAP just means Vermont Comprehensive Assessment Program. So when we talk about those two things, they're interchangeable. So Judy and I wanted to share with you folks a little bit of an overview of Cognia, kind of the who, what, where, when, why, and how. And I know people can read this on their own, so I'm not going to read you slide by slide, but I did want you to be aware of the basics. This is an assessment that our students take 3 through 9 for reading and for math. And then they also take science in 5th grade, 8th grade, and 11th grade. It is a very sizable assessment. It's pretty intimidating, I think, to our kids. The purpose of it is to sort of track an individual's progress toward proficiency, but also to provide insight into our system, to give us some ideas about maybe where we could do better. This is an assessment taken in all of Vermont, and it's actually a federal mandate that we have some sort of a system to report out. And so it's taken in other states as well. Our teachers give the assessment and they give it in their classrooms, but the classroom looks a little bit different for the students than it does on a typical day. We have to cover up multiplication tables and anchor charts and anything that the kids might be used to. And it's a lot more of a strict environment. So I don't know that the little guys care so much, but the older kids get kind of annoyed. They have to put their cell phones away because of test security purposes. And it's about a 6 to 8 hour test. And we certainly allow a good long window of time. Some kids take longer, some kids take less time, but that's kind of the overview. So Judy is going to talk a little bit more specifically. Yes, go ahead.
So to clarify, there's 3 different parts. So the minimum 6 hours is all 3 parts. So if you're looking at the ELA session, we take it over 2 days. So we have 2 sessions and it's about an hour and a half each day. So there's about 3 hours. Students can have more time than that if they require it. Same with the math. It's about an hour and a half over 2 days. Same with the science. It's about an hour and a half over 2 days. So it's a little more than 6 hours that we allot for them. So it's minimum. The state tells us it's minimum 6 hours to do it. but we give them a little bit extra time, and students know while they're taking it that they can have extra time if they get to the end of our hour and a half and they're still got some more to do. So this slide shows mostly what to expect in each of the different sessions. So a lot of the ELA is multiple choice, multiple select. There's a lot of drop-down menu things that go on. There's stuff that's inside of the sentences or paragraphs. I mean, that's a sentence where you have to kind of click on it in different parts to answer questions. Yeah. There's drop-downs, drag and drop. Inline choices was what I was just talking about. There's different technology enhancements where you have to listen to a piece and then answer the questions. And those, they don't have the option of reading the passage. It's more of a listening comprehension kind of piece.
And they can rewind it.
Yep.
So just like if they were reading, they would have multiple opportunities to reread. They can listen more than once too.
Yes. And there's constructed responses where they have to give them short little answers about something. We just took the ELA one. At the end of it, there was an essay that they had to write. So they went through 53 questions, I think it was, at 5th grade level. And then they had the essay to write. And they had to read several different passages, answer some questions about it, and then they wrote an essay about that section. The math one, there's the same thing, multiple choice, multi-select, like you choose different pieces and parts, open-ended responses where you have to put in your work and show your work, fill in the blanks, drop downs. There was in the past some graphing, but I hadn't noticed that on the practice pieces.
Of this year.
This year, the practice pieces didn't have the actual creating a line graph using the lines or the bars. The science is 2 sessions, 5th grade. It includes in 5th grade everything from kindergarten all the way up through 5th grade. So all the NGSS, the National Science Standards, it covers everything through 5th grade. And so then the 8th grade one is 6, 7, 8, and then it's 9, 10, 11 for the 11th grade. So that's how those, and they have matching and technology. We had gotten in and messed around. There's a little drag. You have to draw. So there you have to get used to all the drawing tools and draw stuff in a...
Make a table, make a chart, and some of them. So...
We've talked about it being entirely online, and over time it's progressively made it so there's not a whole lot of anything that we do in the classroom. Everything the kids do is directly through their Chromebooks on a TestNav site. So it's a secure site that they just click onto through the bookmarks that we have for the technology piece, and that allows so they can't go off to Google and check things out. So it really is secure. The other secure part of it is we as teachers have to take a proctoring thing where we have to learn how things that we can and cannot do during the testing. Mm-hmm. So we cannot read questions to the kids. We cannot answer their question if they don't know what something is. We just have to, we can't say, hey, you didn't finish that, or hey, you need to write another sentence, or hey, you missed a question. We can't say any of that. It's just let the kids do what they can do. Mm-hmm. And the classroom itself has to be, the validity of the test means we have to take everything off the walls or cover it. So like I teach mostly math and science, anything that's math related that could lead them to an answer or give them help has to be covered. So like multiplication charts and that kind of stuff, which is different because when I first started 17 years ago, they were allowed to have a multiplication chart, and we actually photocopied them and handed them off.
Yep, I remember that.
Yep. Now they're not allowed to do that. And that's a struggle for the kids.
Yeah, you take away all of the resources that they usually have.
Using, yeah.
Go for it.
And I would add to the test security and what it is we can and cannot have in our classrooms when students are taking the assessment. It was last year or the year before, someone from the state visits all of the Slate Valley testing sites. Mm-hmm. They randomly select schools on a rotating basis, and someone from the Agency of Education comes to our testing sites and, pokes in and kind of looks from a window to make certain that our testing sites are secure, and then gives us kind of a grade to make certain that we are in compliance. So it is a serious part, and I think it is different to students compared to kind of like a typical day?
It feels pretty intense, I think, for them.
And it does feel pretty intense to them because some of the fifth grade students, I'd gotten feedback. Abby and I were working in the back of my room as they came back from specials one day, and they wanted to know what she was doing there. And why is she there? What are you guys doing? And so I explained to them what we were doing, and they were the ones that wanted to do this slide. They felt that it was very important that their parents and other people in the community understand how they felt about the Cognia test. They find it very stressful. It's too long of a test. You have to sit in one place for hours. You can't use any of your resources, like the classroom charts have to be covered, so you're expected to remember every single thing you've ever learned. And they give you a calculator feature in the math part, but you don't need it on some questions, but it makes it so you can't go back. So they don't want the kids on the test to be able to go back and use that calculator on previous question. So once you hit the next button, you're done with that question. You can't go back and check it. And that was last year. He's now a sixth grade student, but last year I had two students who got very frustrated because they were like, oh my gosh, I knew I should have done this. And then it's like he already hit the next button and he couldn't go back.
That happened to me when I took the practice test too. I knew as soon as I'd done it, I'd gotten it wrong, and I couldn't go back even in the practice test. So
the other big thing was parents say you have to get a good grade, and they don't get a good score. And they don't get their score, of course, until the following school year starts. And they're like, I don't know, I tried my best. I don't know. And the last one is a comment from a student who had to watch me type it to make sure that I was typing in what he wanted to say, is that teachers try to teach us as much as they can before, and then they can't tell us anything during the test. Mm-hmm. So this is feedback from actual fifth graders.
Yeah. I think a lot about that collaborative aspect of school that we tend to be fostering in our district. And I think most districts are really fostering collaboration, math talk, talking about books, talking about experiments, and all of that we're teaching as part of the way we teach and as part of their daily existence goes away as soon as this test starts. Yeah, it's kind of frustrating. So we thought it would be fun to show people some examples, and this is where I think we got the most like aha moments from folks in the community. This is a third grade math question, and at first it seems pretty simple. Danielle's going to add 312 and 285, and you know how to do that, right? Most of our kids know how to do that. But then the question is actually, what plan should she use? And there's these 4 different plans. And I don't know, I read through them all and they all seemed very confusing to me. None of them were the simple, like, I should, line them up and figure out the answer. So it's kind of a convoluted process, and it's very, very wordy, right? Lots of words. So you might know math and be struggling with the language surrounding it. So it makes it a much more difficult question than it appears on the surface at first. Again, third grade, another third grade question, and I apologize, it's kind of hard to read, but I would encourage all of you to go online and try these assessments yourself and really see what they're like. This is a question that has multiple parts. I believe this one had 3 parts. There's a lot of information to read at the beginning, but the part that I wanted to really point out when I saw this question was that big open box and how much students really need to write in order to get a good result on this test. They can't just say the answer. They have to explain all of their thinking in writing, which again, we work on that in math classes. But it's much more supported typically, you get to talk about it. And if you struggle with writing, you might have a hard time with this question. And the other thing, Judy, you've pointed out too, if you look on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see this says math symbols and geometry. You want to talk about that for a minute?
Sure. You're expected to explain how you got your answer. And the only way to do that is to actually show your work. So you have to figure out how to use all these math symbols to then show your work. In 5th grade, We do a lot with fractions.
Mhm.
So we mess around with, for a couple of class periods, on the how to use the fraction pieces that are right there in the math symbol, because it's a little bit different. You click on it, but then you have to click for the top and the bottom. And if you want to change it, you got to go back. And if you hit the back button, you're going to delete the whole entire thing. And so we mess around with it a little bit so that they aren't behind the 8 ball, so to say, when they get on this and they know how to show their work. And it really reinforces for us that you need to show your work in order to get a good grade.
Yep. And this next one is part 2 of that question. And, if you didn't do well on part 1, you're sure as heck going to do well on part 2, because you need part 1's answer to help you with part 2.
Many of the times, the part 2 is reliant on the answer to part 1. Sometimes they'll give up, if there's 3 parts, like the one I'm doing with the class next week, it'll give part A and then part B are 2 different things. And then you have to use information from both of those to do part 3. Mm-hmm. So if you've messed up on one, or you've made a little mathematical error, or put something in wrong, it's not going to be consistent for that 3rd part.
Right. And this is actually what I typed in as my answers. And I remember thinking, I'm going to show you this. I wanted to sort of draw a picture, because I was trying to imagine how would a kid do it, draw a picture of what 4 sheets in each bag would look like. And so I had to use the brackets. I don't know if that's...
No, that's exactly what, yeah.
Because the parentheses would have been multiply. Mm-hmm. But, I just wanted to sort of visually show, like, this is a bag. And then, so it was just it was a challenge. I found myself spending a lot of time on making sure that I'd written this out the way that I wanted it to look. And it took a lot of time and stamina for me. And this is another 3rd grade math one. And again, it's more of an example for me when I was looking at it of how what I would think is a simple way to approach a problem, the simple way to answer the question, it is not one of the options. So it requires a lot of flexible thinking on the part of children, which of course we are working on, flexible thinking. But it does seem more to me like this would be a very advanced question for a 3rd grader to not only be able to solve the problem, but to be able to show how to solve it in multiple ways and express that is pretty challenging. Moving on to ELA, I loved this passage because it threw me off right away. It was, this is the 3rd grade ELA assessment, and this is the very first passage. You'll see it says passage 1. It's the very first passage in the practice test, and I felt like it's going to throw kids off right away because it is, it had all of these Spanish words in it. And of course, in Vermont, we don't have a lot of multilingual children. So Casey, you had said one of the reasons this test had been picked was because it was a little bit more diverse and inclusive than other assessments.
Right. When the state of Vermont was seeking companies to determine what testing group they were going to use, they were trying to identify a group that had, I guess, a reputation of designing a more culturally inclusive set of questions or types of reading passages, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So there are, some challenges with that for our kids who are much more isolated. I think, I don't know how many of our students know what a guayabera is or have heard the word plancha. And so to initially on your first go round get hit with those words can be really confusing for kids. And also notice this over here is an opportunity for the kids to scroll up and down. So what you're seeing there is about a third of that passage. So there's lots for children to be reading through in these passages. Requires an awful lot of stamina on the part of our kiddos. Do you want to talk about this one? Or do you want me to?
No, you can do that.
Keep going, ELA?
You do the ELA, I'll do the
So more ELA, just again, noticing that it's a very long passage, right? This is another one where there's going to be 2 parts to the question. And really what you determine as your answer to the first is going to impact how you answer the second. This is another one, again, we're still in 3rd grade, There's now multiple passages, so the child can toggle back and forth between two passages. And then over here, they're expected to
That's
do
the essay that I referred to.
Yeah. Yep. So take all of the information from two of these passages, write a multi-paragraph opinion piece.
Right.
They have to cite both passages. And this is pretty sophisticated. Even for a 5th, 6th grader, this would be a pretty sophisticated ask. And again, there's some tools that they need to be able to use. These are very similar to what they use every day in Google Docs, so it's not quite as challenging as doing the math.
Ones, yeah.
But they do have to be able to utilize those tools.
And the science one, this one just shows that you're going to read about, this is an 8th grade. At the 5th grade, it's similar. They give them a lot more illustrations. There's something that illustrates, and then you read a little bit about it, and then there's some different talk about whatever science they're talking about. And then you have to answer questions, and they're short answer questions. On this particular slide, a lot of the science is multiple select. So they give boxes. So you have to remind the kids that it says you're supposed to pick 2. And, so they have to pick 2 on the test. And then there's the drop boxes where you choose something and then you choose something further in the sentence. And it has to make sense. And that's what I keep telling the kids. It has to make logical sense between your 2 chooses. You can't say something's going to increase and then something's going to increase again if the situation says it's increasing and decreasing. So you have to really think logically. But there's science is a ton of reading understanding. So it's not so much about your content of the science. You have to know a little bit about some different things in science, but it's more of a comprehension and being able to communicate what you know.
Yeah, and then looking at this next one too, it looks like it's asking them to make a table and a chart, and
that's the draw tool I was referring to. So the pencil gives you the pencil or a line. And so sometimes the kiddos that were practicing last week got a little frustrated because they had used the pencil and then they wanted to use they wanted it to be a straight line, and then they went to toggle on that and they'd accidentally hit the eraser button that's there, and so then it erased their whole entire thing. And so it's just messing around with it a little bit. The block and the smaller block are generally what gives you the colors.
Okay.
Like they had green and black in that particular one, so they had to draw a tree and show the shade of the tree in the practice question.
Okay. So it does require an awful lot of that sort of technical ability to use the platform, which is why we have students practice some with this. But also some scientific understanding and being able to create a chart and all of those things. It's a big ask. So we were thinking when we presented to parents, what can parents do to help their children? And, a lot of just good parenting, right? Encourage your kids to work hard, encourage them to persevere. Help them recognize it's going to be different than what they've done before. It's going to be hard. It's going to be challenging. And it's worth it. It's worthwhile, not trying to scare kids about it.
And telling them more, it's show what you know.
Yeah.
We're not expecting you to show something you don't know.
Right.
Just show what you know, and that's what they're looking at.
Yep. And of course, all the good stuff like eat well, and I know a lot of the schools, get some rest. A lot of the schools do little breakfasts beforehand, or they bring snacks in, the PTOs.
Yeah, the PTOs.
Yeah. But we would encourage parents to try the practice tests for yourself so you know what your kids are up against, and to do them side by side with your child and talk them through. And, how did you answer that question, et cetera. And I like this last one is just a change in language. It isn't you have to, it's you get to, right? You get to tell us and show us what you know. And that can be kind of exciting for kids too. We try to talk it up as much as we can with the little guys when they first take it, because it's going to be big and challenging. And I guess other than that, just one of the thoughts that we had from our presentation to the board was just this idea that people tend to think, Like if kids don't do well on this test, it means they can't read. And if they can't read, or they can't do math, or they don't know anything about science, and just recognizing that not doing well on this test does not mean you can't read.
Nor does it mean you cannot do anything in math.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of skills that our students have that are not reflected in these assessments because of how difficult and sort of convoluted they are. So yeah, our kids can read and do math. Yep. So these assessments are taken by almost all of our students. There's very few students who, because of an IEP status, would qualify to not take it. So within that, there are accommodations for students.
Even most IEP students take it.
Right. Even most.
Accommodations.
Yeah. Or I don't know.
You have to have above a certain participant. I think it's 98% of the students have to participate. And you can, apply to have a student not participate and show evidence for why that is. But really, we do when students are absent or, have to go away on a trip. We have makeup days. They really want to make certain that they capture a high percentage of the school district students. And so, as Abby and Judy said, when students have plans that might allow them to take the test in a small group setting, or
might allow to have it read to them through the interface.
Yep. Yeah, that those are built in. Our data and assessment coordinator makes certain that all those accommodations are uploaded. But all of those need to be documented accommodations. They can't just...
Right. They're written in the IEP and discussed with the team.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And we do have like English language learners. So the test, the math and the science test are available in Spanish, I think 2 or 3 other languages they're available in. But the reading test is always in English, even if you're a second language learner. So there's those types of accommodations as well. And kids are allowed to take a break and walk if they need to walk, though they need to be monitored. They can't just be running around. Because I guess test security, right? They don't want them to go to their locker and Google an answer. So they need to be escorted to the bathroom, escorted to take a walk and take a break if they need to. Trying to think if there's other accommodations, or
I think that
those are kind of the major ones.
So as you heard from Abby and Judy, something that is very important to us is making certain that students and their guardians know that we value the test, and we want to make certain that our teachers are following what's expected of us to be able to facilitate the test. And so as you heard, they provide practice opportunities in classes. We really do stop a good portion of our teaching of our local curriculum in order to make certain that we're ready to, as Abby and Judy said, have students really show us all they know. The same time that we look at this as a data point on a student's learning journey, we recognize that it is just one example of an opportunity to show us what a student knows. And so we use a lot of different data points from assessments that happen in the 5th grade classroom that Judy's facilitating, and that goes into our grade books. We use something called Star 360 that allows us kind of I don't want to say a quicker way to get some feedback, but we facilitate it 3 times a year, and the assessment is a shorter assessment, still focused on the standards that are being assessed in Cognia.
And you get actionable feedback from the STAR that you can immediately start
as a teacher
using with small groups or with your whole class.
Right. And so, when we get the results for our school district, we get them as a school district, meaning it says how many 3rd graders in Slate Valley are proficient readers according to Cognia, how many are proficient at 5th grade math, etc. We also get that information by school and by grade within the school. And we do talk about those results as a school district and how do things map to our curriculum. Are we covering things that we should be covering? But we do also recognize that it is a single opportunity for a student in March through May usually, and that it doesn't tell the entire story of the learner. And so when things are written in newspapers, or they have, the state of Vermont has a dashboard where anyone from the public can type in any school district and see scores for third grade at specific schools and for our entire school district. Know that it, again, I think Abby had said it, or maybe Judy, that it doesn't mean that our students are illiterate, don't have math skills, don't have science skills, that it could be that they're growing as a learner, but yet not at a point where they've achieved proficiency at that specific grade level. It could have to do with kind of stamina of sitting for a test. It could have to do with manipulation of the technology, which is a bit different than what we typically do in our lessons in school. And so we try as often as we can to share other evidence of student performance.
And kids listen to what's being said. They understand that people are not happy with the scores, but it also makes them internalize that they are not.
Right.
I must not be doing very well because I'm in that group that got a lower score, so I must not be doing well.
Right. So that is something that we do deal with students, and I think led partly to Brooke asking, after you guys created the presentation, just to really share with guardians about what the test is maybe share more broadly with our school board, and then this kind of share right now about how we do value it, but how students do recognize that when they hear that they're not performing well, that it can really kind of affect their feelings about themselves as learners. And so I think the more we could do about sharing what the assessment asks and other data points that we have, hopefully might cause people to say, well, geez, you're right, that assessment looks pretty challenging. I bet students can read and do know math and science, and therefore might kind of soften that comment about students
soften and encourage them, instead of, it's kind of discouraging to hear that you and a group that you are with all the time are not very, as they will say, I'm not very smart.
Right.
To try the Cognia practice tests, go to https://vermont.onlinehelp.cognia.org/practice-test. Slate Valley Unified Union School District, March 2025.